Hi, Bruce.
How are you?
Pretty okay, all things considered. Did David talk to you?
No.
Okay, Lisa's not feeling good, so she won't be here tonight. Or that is to say, she may be here, but not running the meeting.
Okay.
Probably David.
All right.
I'm fine.
Huh?
I'm fine.
You got your glasses?
I don't need to be on camera.
You don't need to be on camera. There you are on camera. The whole shoulder is showing. Silly bean.
Wrong glasses.
Huh? Wrong glasses? It's not too late.
Hey, Glenn. How you doing, man?
All right, Bruce.
Uh,
Let me see.
There are mailboxes over there next time. That's okay, no problem. But save yourself some stress. He's wearing a headlamp.
We'll have to put up a sign for mail over there.
Huh?
Put up a little sign with an arrow for where the mail is. It mail?
I know, I thought about that. If there's a party that he doesn't want to.
Just the two of us so far.
Huh?
Haven't seen anybody else show up on screen.
It's not yet 7, and Bruce is maybe letting people in. I'm not sure.
Well, he's apparently letting people in. So I don't think he's keeping anybody out.
Well, you have no way to know, my dear.
That's true. Yeah. Just make the
Yep,
suppositions.
there's some people.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I better
I'll be right back in 1 sec.
Sure. So, hi, David. Hi, Carol. Hi, Chip. $6.58. Can you see okay? No?
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's going to be those charts and graphs and.
Yeah, I can read the names.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Census stuff.
Huh?
Biden is going to continue the census.
No, I haven't heard anything new on that. Have you? No.
I see Norman.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi, good to see you.
How's Joey?
He's good. He's sleeping.
Oh, all right.
Hey, Norman.
Hey,
Hey,
Norm.
Richard.
Hey, David.
Yeah, Tess.
Hey.
Tess. Bruce.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll get going here in a sec. Just give a minute to let more people trickle in.
So I guess we're doing both a password and a waiting room.
I guess so. Was there? Yeah, I guess there's a password.
So,
How's everybody been doing?
Hi, David.
Guess we've officially re-entered more shelter or more stringent shelter in place.
Yeah.
Oh, I just saw Irene has a puppy. Hello. Oh, so cute. Hey, Henry. Good to see you. Now Irene has 2 dogs in her lap. Look at that.
Mhm.
Lap full of cuteness. Aw, hello.
Okay, I guess we'll get started. Thanks everyone for coming to the December meeting of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council. Good to see folks here. Yeah, so tonight we're gonna look at how the Haight voted in the last election, which Calvin Welch is gonna run through for us, and then we're also gonna get a update on the Haight Street corridor from Christian. And so I'm thinking maybe, I don't think Calvin's here yet, but if you're ready, Christian, maybe we can do the Haight Street corridor update first, if that works for you.
Absolutely. Happy to. Can I be given share screen privileges so I can share the
Yes.
presentation?
Yes. Okay, I think you should be able to now.
Just give me a second. It's prompting for a password for some reason.
I made you a co-host.
Okay. Is it still asking for the password, Christian?
Yeah, it's asking me to enter a password to get to the document, but it'll just take me a minute. Give me a
Oh,
second.
okay. Okay. Thanks.
I have an idea about like a workers collective thing that has worked around the country, which is 3D printers. Like have a community 3D printer shop, and we can teach all of our neighbors how to do 3D printing and have like people meet there and do that anyway.
That would be cool. Yeah, I always like worker collective idea. Where have they done that? Has that happened in other places?
Well, they have one down in the Mission, and there's the other one I know of is in Tucson. I think you kind of like look it up on the web, and they have a whole network. 3D
There's been a
printer
number of
collective.
makers places around the city.
Uh-huh.
The there was a woodworking kitchen where you can go in and use all these fantastic, very expensive, big woodworking tools. There was, I think, a library too. You could kind of take out power tools and stuff. Used to be a bike kitchen too.
Did it work?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, there it is.
Woohoo!
You're on your phone,
Thanks,
right?
Kristen.
Thank you guys. Okay. So I won't take up too much time. The idea behind doing it a Haight-Ashbury neighborhood commercial corridor economic recovery plan came from my brain and my brain alone. So if you don't like it, blame me. Essentially the situation. So I'm going to go through the context, an opportunity, some possible next steps, and I'm also going to have a chance to share a little bit of the highlights from the shopping survey that was conducted, and then hopefully facilitate a discussion and dialogue with folks about what they think are good ideas for possible next steps. But the context is that I started to get worried about vacancies on Haight Street in 2016. And that was because we had, through when I took over the Booksmith in 2007, 2008, we had, an economic recession shortly thereafter, 2008 through 2010. And Haight Street actually never really had that many vacancies come up through that particular recession. So when I saw a number of vacancies appearing in 2016, and particularly a number of them that were going unmarketed and just being left vacant for long periods of time, I started to count the vacancies. And in 2016, there were 9 of our approximately 150 storefronts along Haight Street. And this is between Stanyon and Central. So, we include that block beyond Masonic that is the 1300 block that goes all the way to Ritual Roasters as sort of our main Haight Street corridor. And that was because we were seeing an acceleration in rents and a number of other factors that were contributing to storefronts closing. By February 2020, this year, we had 21 vacancies. And that was before the pandemic. And so, there's multiple factors that are happening right now. But as of the moment, right now, we have now 31, which is about a little over a fifth of the storefronts. And we've seen some vacancies that have been there quite some time, including a couple on the block that the Booksmith's on there at the corner, including where the old shoe repair shop was and the old kids clothing and toy store was. That particular building now has 4 vacancies in it. And we also had seen, a lengthening of the amount of time that storefronts are being left vacant. The typical length of vacancy was 1 to 2 years, which is actually quite a long time. If you think about, what it takes to, put a sign up and entertain a handful of, interested parties and having somebody refit the space for their shop and moving in, it usually takes less than a year to accomplish that if you're motivated. And so, we had problems pre-COVID, but with the pandemic and the economic circumstances that have led to a number of stores closing, either because maybe owners were getting close to retirement anyway. I might put Jim Siegel in that category. He's, had his shop on Haight Street a really long time. But, he has kind of toyed with the idea of closing, and he's publicly said that. He hasn't announced for sure that he's closing, but, I think that the pandemic has created economic circumstances that might accelerate people's decisions to retire. Or there's also going to be circumstances like the case of Love to Death and Audra's shop, where she basically, couldn't come to terms with her landlord for rent that was, to account for the fact that there was no foot traffic and that her store actually had to be physically shut for a period of time during the shelter in place. So she was just getting deeper and deeper into debt if he wasn't going to give any rent concessions. So there's a number of reasons why people are closing during the pandemic. You can imagine what they are, but essentially we're seeing an exacerbation and an acceleration of those closures. So of the 31 storefronts that are currently vacant, 21 were vacant before COVID. 10 businesses have announced permanent closure since the shelter in place has begun, including Haight-Ashbury T-shirts, which now has a number of going out of business signs in its window. But we have also some positive news. We have 4 storefronts that have actually opened since the pandemic. One of them was Higher Consciousness, which was a shop that he had signed the lease pre-pandemic. But then I think some of the other ones are more opportunistic. The Buffalo Exchange was able to expand into the old Shoe Biz 2 storefront to increase their square foot. I'm hearing about the patio restaurant. It has a application for a permit to move into the empty Chinese restaurant spot across the way. I know they had been interested in that spot before the pandemic, but I think the pandemic helped with the negotiations, and so they've been able to get to the rent that they wanted. So there's a number of also positive signs and opportunities. So I don't want to say it's all bad news. It's not all catastrophic. This is the very detailed list of stores that have closed and open that I've been tracking on a spreadsheet. And if anybody's interested in the detail of the methodology behind the count, I'm happy to share that information. I've shared that with the city. Okay, go to the next slide. So there's kind of 5 main reasons that businesses have cited as they're closing. Usually they're giving an interview in a newspaper or to an online journal like Hoodline. Usually they cite high commercial rents. So, there was a conclusion of their lease and they found themselves in a situation where they were having to pay a higher rent than they could really sustain. We have seen commercial rents probably increase 2 to 3 times on Haight Street in general in the time that I've been there. And we've seen, of course, rising labor costs. That's in part because of a mandated increase in the minimum wage, which I think is a very positive step, but also in terms of attracting and retaining talent, people, it's also very expensive because people have to be able to afford high rents and live in the city. We've also had ongoing construction. The Haight-Ashbury Music Store cited this as one of the reasons why, it was sort of a final straw that has depressed foot traffic in the key summer months. And for stores that were really kind of operating on the margin, it was sort of that additional impact to foot traffic that really created a circumstance that made them decide to close. We also have had situations where soft story retrofit is impacting a building. So, for example, the corner store at the corner of Haight and Ashbury came in after that space went through a soft story retrofit. There was also a soft story retrofit that took place at the where the Haight Ashbury Homeless Youth Alliance had their clinic. That became the SF Mercantile after its retrofit. And the spaces that I mentioned in the building where there's 4 vacancies, where the shoe repair and the kids clothing store were, that building is undergoing a soft story retrofit. So that is in part the reason why those spaces probably have not been filled. And then of course, retirement. As I mentioned, there's a lot of merchants like Masood at the Haight Ashbury Music Store that had started their businesses as many as 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And it's just, getting older, getting time to kind of retire or pare down. So that was the reason for the closure of the shoe repair shop and the kids clothing store were retirements. So rather than see it as a glass half empty, I guess there's always the opportunity to see it as a glass half full. The Office of Economic and Workforce Development had actually initiated a shopper survey. They did that prior to the pandemic, again, in part because of the large number of vacancies that were taking place. And I'm going to be able to share with you in the next 2 slides some of the preview of the information that's come out of that survey. The city also, will be putting forth recommendations that the Board of Supervisors will be assisting with implementation, but for citywide recovery. And there's a series of new programs, and I think Irene was mentioning worker cooperatives, but apparently there's a program that's been created to help support creating worker cooperatives. So that'll be something that the city has actually focused on doing, and we might actually apply, have some of our potential storefronts filled with resources from programs that the city is currently putting into place. Now, that being said, I don't think we need to rely on the city alone. I think we as a community can do a lot to attract businesses to our community, and that's partly why I wanted to really make this presentation to HANC, but I would propose to also make it to CVIA and others, because I think that as a community, we can all play a role in helping to shape what the neighborhood looks like in the future. Also, there's the construction is about to end. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, and the public realm plan is actually scheduled to complete in the spring of 2021. So, already you're seeing the leveled sidewalks, and you can see the beautiful pedestrian scale lights. The trees have been mostly planted. They're going to still come back and add all the what they call street furniture. The parking meters went back first, but they're also adding the bike racks back. They're adding the garbage cans back. They'll be putting in the railings that go around the planter boxes that are decorative with a Art Nouveau pattern. So it'll be a very attractive finish to the construction when it's done in the spring. Okay, so this is a quick sneak peek of the shopper survey that was conducted by Livable City. I had requested this information for this meeting so I could present it to you all, and they were able to throw some data together, and then OEWD said, oh, no, we're not ready to share. Don't share this anywhere. So anyway, word of caution, don't share this widely. There's a lot of caveats. There's more analysis to be done, but this is just like a really early sneak peek, so you can see what's coming out of it. So they did 497 survey responses. They said about 312 of them are actually really good quality ones, like maybe the other portion, we're going to have to learn if they were outside of the trade area, what portion were, just not fully completed surveys, or what happened. I know some people had reported problems filling out the survey that was, available and put into the world via the internet, like in the period of October to mid-November, around Thanksgiving, they closed it. They're saying that the demographics, age, and race appear to be representative of the overall trade area that they were surveying. And oops, somebody's texting me. You have the phone turned sideways. Okay, so maybe if I go this way, is that better?
Better. Yeah, that is better.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, much
okay, great. I need to figure out how to go back. Okay, there's it back. Okay, great. Thanks for the tip. First time I'm doing a presentation on my phone here. So they also said they appeared to have good geographic coverage. I guess those blue little dots indicate the locations of where the surveys were collected from. And I know that it was distributed through HANC's mailing list, as well as CVIA's, HIA's, a number of other places like Hoodline, and the Merchants Association. So, and there were some postcards put in the local businesses. So that's how the survey results were, the survey was communicated out to folks. Okay. All right, so here's the other second slide of sneak preview results. So not all shopping patterns. So basically they recognized that they were going to do the survey before the pandemic, but then they realized that they were in the position of conducting the survey during the pandemic, and that people's shopping patterns would have changed. So they actually included questions in the survey. If you took it, you saw this, about what your shopping patterns were prior to the pandemic and what they were during the pandemic. And so what they found was that most notably groceries, restaurants, pharmacies, books, and other entertainment shopping purchases were the ones that changed the most in response to the pandemic and the travel restrictions. So presumably people started shopping at a grocery that was a little bit closer if they didn't want to take public transportation. There's different reasons why people might have changed their shopping patterns. And I honestly don't have the detail behind these survey results to really give you color commentary. So we will, try to really get the detail from those that administered the survey to really understand what the meaning of that is. Additionally, they said that there were a number of respondents who said they could really find what they needed in our neighborhood already by walking, and particularly grocery shopping and Gus's Market was mentioned with frequency. A substantial number of respondents expressed their issues with the neighborhood, and particularly concern about rising costs. Certainly, when rents are increasing and the cost of payroll is increasing, then it's natural that you'll see the costs of goods increasing if those goods can be marked up. So that has been real. And there was also obviously people from Coal Valley were taking the survey. So, safety concerns about coming to Haight Street. And yes, they mentioned visible homelessness as a reason why they wouldn't necessarily shop in this location. So with most of the respondents not avid third-party ordering platform users, the community suggested neighborhood pickup delivery initiatives to help small businesses stay afloat. Now, I'm not really sure. I would love to get more detail on the number of times people cited that as a recommendation, if this was like maybe, a real handful of people, or if this was like a broad theme that many respondents mentioned. I don't think it was a prompted question, so it would have been one of the suggestions that people would have entered in the comments. So it'll be interesting to learn more about what the how robust that recommendation was. The community, the real main thrust of this survey was to identify businesses that were needed for Haight Street. And I was really quite surprised by the initial results of what they said were expressed as shopping needs. People apparently wanted more cafes. They wanted more art supplies. Obviously, maybe some people aren't aware of Mendel's, or maybe feel that Mendel's is insufficient. So I'm not sure. So I'd love to get more detail about that. Recycled and gift goods. So it sounds like maybe people had suggestions on favorite shops that they go outside of the neighborhood for to procure those. Pharmacy, that's not a surprise. Pharmacy has sort of been one of the businesses that I've seen pop up again and again in like the headline comments as something that the Haight really needs. Obviously, we have Pharmaca and Walgreens, not too far from our location, but obviously to make it a one trip to Gus's and the pharmacy would be great. I was really surprised by the answer post office. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if that's an indication of people wanting like a UPS or a FedEx store. I'm not really sure what that is about because as you guys know, we have a post office on Clayton at Haight. So maybe people felt like we needed more postal services, or maybe they just wanted to retain the post office.
Or maybe they don't know it's there.
Or maybe they don't know it's there. Right? So, I mean, these are questions that I have for the survey, people that conducted the survey, to see if we can get more insights into, what people are thinking here. Laundromat. So obviously there's a couple laundromats well, I guess there's just two that I can think of. Maybe people want something a little bit closer to their block. And then nightlife was another mention. So as I said, these are results that are super preliminary, and OEWD actually told me not to share them with anybody. So just letting you guys know that. But, I really wanted to kind of give you a preview of what I had heard, because it gives you a sense of what may be coming out of the survey. We'll have a more detailed presentation of it, I think, in the future, so that we can really deep dive into what the survey is telling us. And so, back, possible next steps. So I'm almost done with my slides. Obviously the survey will help inform this, but perhaps there's also community input to people that didn't take the survey. And I see somebody's raised their hand. Go ahead and chime in if you'd like. I don't know if I can unmute you. You'll probably have to unmute yourself.
It's star six.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes,
you are. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had a question. I just did that. I didn't think I'd get taken. I just wondered, I was going back to the beginning of your presentation today and wondering, do you have information, data that tells you whether the loss of business in the Haight is typical in the city, or are we very different?
That's a very good question, Karen. My anecdotal information is that we are pretty consistent with neighborhoods like North Beach and Castro, but not necessarily typical of all neighborhoods across the city. And my theory on that is that North Beach, Castro, and Haight have seen higher prices for their storefronts because they have such high foot traffic. They're sort of like secondary to Union Square as major commercial corridors. They also have the benefit of major tourist foot traffic. So I think it's a combination of, like if you're a real estate person and you want to buy a building, like when they advertise a building for sale on Haight Street, they say, this is a landmark neighborhood. It's sort of like, it's really attractive to international investors, not just local people, and so I think what's happened is that there are certain neighborhoods like Haight, like Fillmore, like North Beach, like Castro, that have actually seen higher levels of speculative purchasing of the buildings and skyrocketing rents.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and sorry, I can't easily check the chat while I'm presenting. So I saw a message come up in the chat. Was there something that somebody can read aloud?
Yes, it says, it's from Jamie Michaels. Union Street is likely another street experiencing vacancies at high rate for an extended period, including pre-COVID.
Yeah,
There's
Union.
also somebody on the telephone. There's also telephone contact.
Yeah, if you have a question, go for it.
Yeah, this is Peter Warfield. Thank you very much for this whole report. Two things. First, it seemed to me that there was quite a busy time building up on weekends in particular. Seemed pretty healthy around the Goodwill and certainly around the pot shop across the street from Goodwill on Cole. So that struck me as quite interesting. And the second question is, who is doing the surveys at a city agency? You mentioned OEWD. I'm not familiar with that. One of my concerns as somebody who's not got as much computer capacity and so on is that the survey seemed to be only for people who had a cell phone or possibly a computer.
Correct.
And if you didn't have one or didn't want it, then you were pretty much left out.
I agree with
So
that, Peter. Yeah, it definitely did not try to bridge the digital divide. I think that the survey is not going to be the end all be all to the decisions that are made in terms of future investments in the community. I think that we need to continue, like presentations to HANC and conversations like this are what we need to make sure that we're also doing broader outreach beyond people that, happen to be on those neighborhood groups and mailing lists, and we're able to take the survey electronically. But specifically, I wanted to just go into the details of the possible next steps that are shown on the slide. And I know that people on the phone can't see this, but I wanted to say that I think beyond identifying possible needed businesses, is that once we identify, let's say of the 31, or by the end of this pandemic, we might have 40 or 50 vacancies on Haight Street. It sounds scary, but I think it's possible. I think we could probably identify, 5 or more neighborhood serving businesses that we would really like to see come into those vacancies. And, that might be, I listed pharmacy and shoe repair, but, it could be any of a number of businesses that we as a community identify as high priority for a community. And I think we can work to recruit entrepreneurs to create businesses, either entrepreneurs that already run those types of businesses, or for example, like helping Gus's to expand into the pharmacy area. They're getting big enough that they probably can do that. Do we want to find worker cooperative type groups that want to build up, like you said, a 3D printing cafe, or all these kind of creative opportunities exist now, right? And I think we as neighborhood can make it really attractive to entrepreneurs by including like a neighborhood marketing package that gives information about the demographics of our neighborhood, what our neighborhood has really identified as key priority areas, and then we can do things to help support them get off the ground, like crowdsourcing, capital to help them get going, things like that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think also, there's an opportunity to work with landlords and realtors to support their recruitment efforts. And I noticed that there's a number of business storefronts that are just not even listed for rent. And I'm really interested in, a process by which we reach out to landlords to really understand why they have vacancies that they're not marketing, and what it would take to get them to get those spots filled. I do think ultimately we will need to have to go to a storefront vacancy tax, which the community already, the city already passed, but has been put on hold. in order to really motivate landlords to fill some of these vacancies. But I don't think there'll be a majority of vacancies that need the tax to get motivated. And then, finally, as I mentioned, the city actually is going to be very focused in the next couple of years on economic recovery, particularly in terms of job creation. And I think there's an opportunity to really not lean into formula retailers and loosening our zoning restrictions, but rather really giving over the community and the neighborhood to community land trusts, to worker collectives, to find ways that the community takes a greater stake in ownership in the neighborhood commercial corridor. And, I think those are really powerful ideas that this neighborhoods are very familiar with, but I think we have to think about how do we accomplish that. And that's what I want to invite people to participate in the conversation. And I saw Sherry, you were raising your hand. Do you want to speak?
If there's a chance to make a comment and you can hear me, I have a comment to make.
Yeah.
You're talking to Peter? That's me?
Peter, I think Sherry had her hand up, so I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
Sherry could speak.
Sure. I heard a long silence.
Is Sherry still there? And maybe she's on mute. I don't know, David or Bruce, can you tell if she's still on?
Yeah, I think Sherry's muted. If you have the ability to unmute yourself. If
I don't see her name unless it's just a phone number.
yeah, maybe we can try and come back to her if you.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Oh wait, I think you're unmuted, Sherry. If you want to go ahead and ask. Okay, we'll come back.
Okay. Was there another question, or should I go back to Peter?
Well, there was a couple of items in the
chat
box. So Kat and Richard was saying the Gus's would likely expand if they can own the space. That's been their pattern. And what was one question was, what was the impact from the road work?
What was the impact from the road work? So as you guys probably know, we had road work that started as early as 2014. That was primarily on the 1400 block. And that's where we had the 7 gas leaks and the 2 sinkholes. And that was emergency sewer work that led to the termination of the subcontractor. And then they resumed the public realm plan in 2018. And that's been ongoing with a plan to conclude in 2021. So we've really, bore the brunt of the impact financially. I think most businesses reported anywhere from 10 to 30% decline in sales, depending on, the proximity of the construction work to their storefront. So obviously the most disruptive work was when they were tearing up the sidewalk in front of your storefront. So that usually was about a month to 2 month period of time where you had the least amount of foot traffic and biggest decline in sales. And then there were other periods of time where there was just kind of ongoing, partial road closures that really limited people's ability to get to the street or find parking. And that, was more of the kind of constant ongoing, negative impact to sales that's predictable that, a large scale infrastructure project like public realm projects have. We had seen that in the Castro, and we had talked to the Castro merchants about what that looked like for them, so that we really were aware of it. So a lot of us were able to kind of manage through that, but certainly was, a challenge if you were locked into a long-term lease with an accelerating rent that you couldn't really make up the lost sales.
Why don't you take Peter's call?
Oh, and I see Christian also raising his hand.
Yes, hi, Kristen. Thanks very much for the presentation. The question is regarding the number of businesses that eventually will be closed. You said something 40 to 50.
Yeah.
Is there any way to hammer or any way for you to actually sort of be more proactive in terms of knowing what the situation is for some of those businesses, and if there's some maybe proactive way to try to avoid that they or help them, or is there any things that can be done proactively to sort of limit those closures?
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, so I think right when shelter in place happened in March, we really pulled together as a merchant community, and OEWD, to their credit, also did a great amount of outreach. So we did, have a workshop on how to renegotiate your lease. We had lots of information sharing about the PPP and EIDL programs that would provide temporary cash in the form of grants or low interest loans. There were a number of factors that that actually have gotten us to this point, so that we have not had more closures. But in reality, there were certain landlords like Audra's, for Love to Death, where she just it was not going to budge on, was holding her to her commitments. One of the hair salons, the landlords wanted to double the rent at the conclusion of his lease. I mean, it just really unrealistic. I mean, the landlords clearly wanted a vacancy by kind of holding it to that kind of level. I mean, if you're a landlord, you might say, well, I had financial commitments, and if you can't meet them, I have to find someone who can. I just don't think it's a realistic expectation in a pandemic that you're going to be able to demand, these higher rents. But most landlords have been somewhat flexible, either in terms of, allowing for delayed rent payments, or for doing a percentage of sales rent type of arrangements for a temporary period of time. And so we've been all kind of sharing best practices and sharing that information with one another. And then, again, as new grants become available, I think there's a lot of hope that there'll be a second level of stimulus that will come from the federal government, coming up, that will also help. But yeah, I mean, there were just examples of, some of the businesses that closed. I think, honestly, they probably were kind of borderline close already. And this was just sort of the thing that made it like that, it was the last straw.
Yeah. So, but there's some businesses that are sort of fixture of the neighborhood. I'm thinking of, the business, the T-shirt business at the corner, for example.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But I think, from the story, it seems that there was really not much we could do. But I'm thinking of Club Deluxe, for example. I mean, that's another one where,
yep.
This talking about nightlife, that's basically one of the bars in San Francisco that has live music every night, right? So that would be really, I think it'd be terrible if it closed, but so there's no way to really know where they are at, what's going on with them, and in general, there's some businesses that people like, and that would be great to know what their situation is, and if there's things we can do. I don't know if it would make any sense to write letters to the landlord saying, the whole neighborhood is behind this,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it might do much, but
yeah. So maybe even just letting people know that there's neighbors interested in helping to negotiate with landlords. So I know that the T-shirt shop, I believe that the T-shirt shop situation is more of a retirement situation and less of a landlord is working with them on their rent. I'm pretty sure. So I think his name is Paul. I think he's been running that shop for a long time. Yeah.
And do you know about Club Deluxe, where they are?
I don't know about Club Deluxe. I know that a lot of the bars, bars have been hit really hard because if they didn't serve food, they weren't allowed to open. Some bars were able to add food. and some bars, you know, were able to do like cocktail delivery with food. But honestly, it's nothing close to the, you know, like the level of sales that were there before. And so I think, you know, some of them are kind of banking on the hope that the legislation that the supervisors have passed is that there's an eviction moratorium for bars, and that, or for pretty much any business that has to be closed during the pandemic. There's a commercial eviction moratorium, just like there's a residential eviction moratorium. But that there's now legislation that Peskin introduced that would give businesses, depending on their size, a year to 2 years to pay back all the back rent. So that might work for some of those bars. But I do know the owners of Club Deluxe specifically, so we could reach out to them. You know, I haven't been able to reach out to all the businesses one-on-one, but as people bring up, you know, businesses that they're concerned about, I'm certainly happy to facilitate those introductions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have more slides, Kristen, that you wanted to finish out, and then maybe we can take a few
Yeah,
more?
no, I wanted to thank everybody.
Can I still make a comment?
Oh,
Am I
yes,
still on
sorry,
the list?
Peter. Yes, sorry, Peter. Meant to come back to you.
Yeah. So this is Peter again. I wanted to put a flea in the ear of folks and mention perhaps a need that's a non-commercial use of space, and possibly as a kind of pop-up thing, and that is a non-commercial presence by the supervisor or by the city or by some other agency that could provide some of the information that we might be getting from City Hall now that it's closed to visits, and the responsiveness to phone calls seems to be very limited, let's put it nicely. I'm thinking of either a storefront or possibly even just a protected bulletin board for things that are really concerning people, like what's the status of unemployment insurance? What's the status of eviction protections? What is the status of all kinds of things that really profoundly affect people that aren't necessarily having to do with the merchants, but with what's going on in the world and in our city and so on, and what services there are, what protections there are, what opportunities there are. So that's a thought that I had for having a supervisorial or a city presence in some fashion or another on or close to the street.
And Jen Snyder, who is from Supervisor Preston's office, just posted in the chat that she thought that was a great idea, Peter.
Who was it? Somebody from Preston?
It's me, Jen, Peter from Dean's office.
Oh, great.
We have a question in the chat from Chip Isaac. What is the city doing to enforce the vacancy tax that was voted into place?
So they've put it on hold. So there was, the voters passed it in the fall 2019, and there was a provision in there that the supervisors could put the tax on hold at any point if they thought it was necessary. In fact, they decided to delay it, and it will be revisited by the Board of Supervisors in the new year with the new board.
Okay. And a couple other items in the chat. One was another one from Kat and Richard. If the community knows a business is in trouble, it would give us a chance to see if we can support with fundraisers, crowdfunding, etc.
Agreed. Yeah.
I put in a couple of items. One is let's find a way to get greedy property owners to lower their rents. And also maybe have clubs like Club Deluxe hold live online shows with like a $1 or $5 cover charge. And people can serve themselves alcohol and food at home. Also, some bars contracted with adjacent restaurants to serve in the parklets. For example, Parada 22, did that with Murray's and the Milk Bar.
Exactly. Yeah, the ABC, the state body that oversees alcohol licensing, surprised us all with being like really loosening of restrictions. You know, possibly to the chagrin of people like Bruce that are working on issues related to alcohol justice. But they definitely did things like allow for takeout. They did things like allow bars to, when if they could do a partnership with a food provider, to have a outdoor dining type of arrangement, and to extend their alcohol licenses temporarily to those spaces.
Okay, I think if there's any other last burning questions, I think we're ready to wrap it up.
That sounds great. And I just wanted to mention that after seeing this presentation, I'm going to add all of the thoughts that I heard today. But if you have more thoughts as you're thinking about it that come up, Irene, more ideas about 3D workshops and other things like that, let me know. And I am collecting all of those in this presentation in the back of the deck with all the different ideas that I'm hearing, so that we can capture those. And so there might be something that comes from that in the future. So thank you so much for your time today to present this.
Great, thank you so much, Kristen. Yeah, it's great to have your insight, and thanks for that.
Everybody unmute and thank Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
Thank
and I
you,
saw
Kristen.
Regina saw it. So
Thank
we
you,
had
Kristen.
Thank you,
the head of
Kristen.
small business watching.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, Regina, put it in there.
Yeah.
So
and Preston too. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, we're gonna have we're gonna do a couple updates. Yeah, thanks Jen for coming. We have Supervisor Preston's office here, gonna give us a couple updates before we go into how the hate voted.
Thanks, guys. I'm Jen Snyder. If we haven't met, I work in Dean's office, and Preston Kilgore, who's our another aide in Dean's office, is here too. He wanted to see Kristen's presentation. Thanks. And I'm really looking forward to another one of Calvin's How the Hate Voted. I will never miss it. So I wanted to let you guys know that we have 2 new fellows for our fellowship program in Dean's office, Lex and Ty, and they're both on this call, and they're going to be working with me on all things hate related, because it's a busy neighborhood, busy area, and there's lots going on, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting what you need from the supervisor's office. So they're here to assist me, and and you and everybody, and they're awesome. Stellar politics, super on top of it, great at doing design, awesome at flyering, all the things that we need from our lovely fellows in the Dean office. So they can drop their contact info. I'll drop my contact info again in there as well. Just 2 other quick things. One, we're doing office hours on Wednesday next week from 1 to 2. I'll drop the way to register for that. And we're asking if folks, if you can submit your question beforehand, that might be helpful. We've had different office hours where we kind of get the same question over and over and over, and we're trying to streamline. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that this month we start doing power washing twice a month, so every other week, all the way down Haight Street. But there's also this new program that DPW is launching or relaunching called Clean Corridors. And it's going to be a power washing and litter removal and a beautification of the street. And that's on the 17th, starting at 8 a.m. You can go out there and talk to them. They're going to be going by merchant stores as well and asking folks how things are going. You can give them a piece of your mind or say thanks or however you're feeling, up to you. And we did get it extended after we talked to HAMA, the Merchants Association. Instead of going, they were going to go to Ashbury, but we're just having them do the whole thing down to Central. So it'll be the whole 9 yards. So yeah, that's what we're up to. Lots of other stuff, but get in touch anytime. I'm around. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, thanks, Preston, and good to virtually meet you, Lex and Ty. So give me a sec. So we're gonna go into how the Haight voted with Calvin Welch, and just trying to pull it up right now, the file.
Oh, I have it.
Oh, you have it? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'll do it.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, Calvin, take it away.
Hi, folks. We're going to take a look at how the Haight voted this last November. As folks may know who've seen this before, I look at the neighborhood in three different areas of the neighborhood. The North Panhandle precincts. Bruce, I wonder if we could have the map up. The North Panhandle precincts, which is 5 precincts. The Flatland precincts, which is outlined in red, which is 7 precincts. And the hills, known in real estate circles as Coal Valley, is the third area. And it's important to understand that these sub areas basically have a pattern that has been very, very consistent over the years. The North Panhandle could be called liberal voting precincts. The Flatlands could be characterized as progressive voting precincts, and the Hill precincts could be classified as moderate voting precincts. But as you'll see tonight, that's generally only manifested in intensity of vote, not in fundamental difference. And where it is primarily made clear is in candidates, in voting for candidates. So when I say that these are Haight-Ashbury precincts, and this is a Haight-Ashbury definition of liberal, progressive, and moderate, I think you'll see that when we look at ballot measures, especially when we compare how the Haight-Ashbury vote compared to D5 or the city, and most especially the state. As I have said, like to say, the Haight-Ashbury is to San Francisco in voting patterns what San Francisco is to California. So we're kind of the most San Francisco voting area of San Francisco, and San Francisco is kind of the most Haight-Ashbury voting part of California. Not to put too fine a neighborhood nationalist point on it. Next slide, please. So the turnout in the North Panhandle was 89%. In the Flatlands, it was 88%. And in the hills, it was a very robust 92%. But as you can see, percentages are a little misleading. The Flatlands have cast almost the same number of votes as both the North Panhandle and the Hill precincts combined. A little bit more from the North Panhandle and the Hill precincts, but you get an idea of the size of the vote. Although also the misleading nature of percentages is although turnout was 89% in the Haight-Ashbury, that 89% in actual votes cast was about 3% less than the actual votes counted or cast in 2016. That is to say, there were more voters in the neighborhood in 2016. I'm sorry, was that a question?
No, I think there was some feedback, but I think
Okay. Next slide, please. So this is, for me, I'm going to take some time here. This is a really staggering set of events. And I was so staggered by it. This is the increase in the Trump vote in the Haight-Ashbury. And I took a look at citywide, and the increase citywide was pretty staggering. And so I was so shocked. I started looking at other cities. Philadelphia had a huge increase in Trump vote. LA had a 300,000 vote increase in Trump vote, LA County, between 2016 and 2020. San Jose had almost a 60% increase in Trump vote. New York City, especially New York City, had almost a 60% increase in the Trump vote. I think in many ways, this is kind of the canary in the gold mine. Traditionally, Democrats have depended heavily on urban votes and have basically no urban policy. What is the Democratic Party's housing policy? What is the Democratic Party's transit policy? What is the Democratic Party's employment policy for urban areas? They don't have such policies. And this year, it kind of caught up. I mean, it's interesting. Let me put it to you this way. If the trend continues, if in 4 years the Republican vote equals the increase that has occurred in the last 4 years in San Francisco, Trump-style voters will be able to dictate outcomes of local ballot measures. I think that the Democratic Party is at a very critical point. And the one thing that saved it was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the great unifier of voters in favor of Biden. And without Donald Trump on the horizon, Biden and the Democrats, the National Democrats, are going to have to do a little bit better, in my opinion. And the staggering change, and we'll see when we look at the state level, is that California Democratic Party is in even worse shape than the National Democratic Party, at least in terms of issues and support of their articulated positions amongst Democratic voters in San Francisco. Next slide. Excuse me, Democratic voters in California. Next slide. This is a manifestation done by a fellow by the name of Chris Harvins, who took a look at the vote, and take a look at the parts of the city that increased the more purple the vote, the greater the increase between 2016 and 2020 of the Trump vote. Look at the parts of the city that manifest that. Number one, it's both conservative and liberal voting areas, both west and south. And the staggering for me is the Mission and the Tenderloin. These are where poor people are, and poor people voted for Trump in a greater percentage in 2020 than they did in 2016. Again, I think this is a real shot across the bow to the Democratic Party, and we need to really take a look at what they're going to be doing to address that. I mean, for Bayview, the Crocker Amazon, the Ingleside, Chinatown, the Tenderloin, and a good part of the Mission, to move in that direction, not to mention the Western Addition, is, I think, really remarkable. Next slide, please. So the big election in District 5 was, of course, the supervisor's election. And this is how they both did in 2019. The two top candidates were the same in 2019 and 2020. The difference was the massive turnout. But as you can see, Dean picked up dramatically, almost doubled his vote in the North Panhandle between 2019 and 2020. He increased by over 1,000 votes his majority in the flatlands. And even in the Hill precincts, which he narrowly lost, he still picked up over 70% of his vote from 2019. It's really quite an impressive showing, but next slide, please. This was the third time that Dean ran in the district, and the turnout differences between the two presidential years, 2016 and 2019, are, I think, dramatically demonstrated by this slide. If you take a look at Dean's vote between 2016 and 2020, it's not quite as an impressive increase as it was in looking at 2019 to 2020. It's important for people to remember that in 2016, Dean Preston got the second highest number of votes for supervisor in the city. Unfortunately, it was second only to his opponent, who got the most votes cast for supervisor. Dean Preston beat every supervisor candidate, winning and losing in every other district in 2016. So he got 1,414 votes in the North Panhandle in 2016. He got 1,461 votes in 2020. He got 2,631 votes in the Flats in 2016. He got 2,699 votes in 2020. He got 1,150 votes in the Hills in 2016. He got 1,277 votes in 2020. So there's a remarkable difference, that turnout makes, you can see over the years. And second of all, Dean pretty much exceeded his second highest finish in 2016. Next slide, please. As people may know, the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council does not take positions on candidates, but we do take positions on ballot measures. And this year we went absolutely crazy. We took positions on 7 state measures, and what is that? 9, 10 local measures. And in all but one, our positions were reflected by the votes of folks in the district. we have since 2000 taken positions on I think 85, 90 ballot measures, and we're about 93, 94%. I'm not saying that the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council is this electoral juggernaut that if you get our endorsement, we do such extraordinary work that we bend our will, the voters of this district to our will. That isn't how we work. That isn't how we roll at all. But I think it's pretty clear that the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council's membership pretty much reflects where the Haight-Ashbury is. And a Haight-Ashbury endorsement, a Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council endorsement is a pretty good indication of where voters in the Haight-Ashbury are going to be. It was only the striking shift was in the state measures. The state voters rejected San Francisco's vote, the Haight-Ashbury's vote, on key and critical issues that were also endorsed by Newsom and the state Democratic Party, which reinforces a question that I raised in the Trump vote, that there is a very serious disconnect between the state Democratic Party and state Democratic voters. And it's really important. The next important thing to learn from this detailed chart is how very San Franciscan we are, how our pluralities, our majorities are even stronger than citywide majorities. And next slide, please. Where this really shows is in the two measures that receive the most money of at the state level. Prop 22, to remind folks, is the Uber Lyft measure to do in the existing state law that made contract workers actual employees of Uber and Lyft. And they spent tens of millions of dollars on that campaign. And Proposition I, sponsored by our Supervisor Dean Preston, drafted and campaigned for by Dean, received the most money against. So what did the Haight-Ashbury do? It went overwhelmingly yes on 22 and yes on I. Excuse me, no on 22 and yes on I. It went the exact reverse of where the money went. And that's the Haight-Ashbury that I know. That's the voting pattern that I understand. And when you take a look at the Hill precincts, you will see that on these two really important issues, the intensity may be a little less, although not even that much less than the North Panhandle, but the votes were the same. The North Panhandle, the Flats, and the Hills voted against Uber and Lyft and voted to increase the tax on real estate transactions over $10 million, which is what Proposition I was. So even though we like to scapegoat our moderate voting folks up on the Hill in Coal Valley, on issues, we do have something in common. We do have a great deal in common, which is always very interesting to me. Next slide, please.
That's it. That's the last slide.
Oh, so we don't have the video?
No, I didn't
No.
get it.
Any questions?
I have one question, Calvin, on the state ballot measures.
Yeah.
Oh God, it escaped me. I'm sorry. I'll come back to me. My question has just escaped me. Sorry.
Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hi, this is Nick Pescariello. This trend that Calvin Melch has noticed, the difference between the state Democratic Party and the California state Democratic voters, is this a new trend? Have you noticed it in the past? And if so, why do you think it's happening?
That's a really good question. I didn't notice it to such a pronounced degree. It was shocking to me that affirmative action did so poorly at the state level. It was kind of shocking to me that the Proposition 13 measure did so badly, but most astounding to me was Prop 22. It's important to understand that Newsom was used against 22 and for both the affirmative action measure and for the other shocking outcome, which was the defeat of the Prop 13 measure. It clearly indicates that he's got virtually no coattails. Now, that could be a function of COVID, that he was focused and voters were not, but the turnout in California was huge. There was extraordinary participation. There was extraordinary interest amongst voters. And it seems to me that the Democratic Party could not figure out a way to campaign in that situation, which is really staggering to me until you start realizing that in San Francisco, for the last 2 years, a major statewide issue that the Democratic Party and Governor Newsom and most of the Democratic elected officials have been pushing high-density market rate development that is generally believed to be, in most communities of color, a gentrification accelerator. And I think in many ways, that vote manifested itself in votes rejecting the positions of the Democratic Party. It is, we'll see over the next year and a half, we'll see. But I mean, the Democratic Party lost 4 of the 7 seats it picked up in 2018 for Congress. It's an amazingly bad outcome for a supposedly blue state in which Biden won by 3 million votes. What do you think? Why do you think it happened?
Oh dear. The labor movement is enervated, is weak. The media is in the hands of billionaires. We are, in fact, even on this call, in the hands of billionaires who are monitoring, wiretapping, and data mining everything we do and many things we don't do that we don't even understand our own consciousness of. So there is my short-term answer.
Here, here.
I remember my question, Calvin. So on this slide for the state, you know, even though we lost those kind of 4 congressional seats down in the kind of the Orange County, Central Valley area, I find it interesting that still overwhelmingly Democrats got elected, but all these ballot initiatives failed. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, I guess you have to ask the question of which Democrats got elected. I mean, clearly, the county committee in San Francisco did much better in its recommendations than the Democratic Party statewide did in its recommendations. So the old political saw that all politics are local is perhaps true, but I think, and this runs counter to the notion that we're all being data mined in ways that we don't even understand and manipulated at a deep level. I mean, the Chronicle was no on I and no on Dean and no on several other measures, virtually all the revenue measures, yet they won at the local level. So I think that the difference is that in San Francisco and in Oakland and in other local municipalities, there was political organizing. I think the Democratic Party made a tactical mistake in not doing campaigning. And I mean, I was stunned to realize that there were 200, 300.
I think you got, there you go.
There were huge, multi-hundred car parades in the Central Valley for Trump. And there was nothing on the Democratic side at all. Here in San Francisco, there was door-to-door work. It was muted, but it still happened. There was a street presence. I think the Democrats hurt themselves by adopting a very passive stance. But more importantly, I think there's a real change happening in the Democratic Party. And I think we'll be talking about this as the year goes on.
I have a question and 2 questions.
Please go.
Okay, to go ahead. Yeah, this is Peter. The first question is, does this cement San Francisco and the Haight-Ashbury's grip on the Cook Capital Award? And number 2, to take the other side of the question that Nick asked, to what do you attribute the strong Democratic showing and the strong showing on the measures in the Haight-Ashbury? In other words, things did what you didn't like elsewhere. How do we explain how come the Haight is the way that it is, in a way that I presume most of us are happy about?
Oh, well, I think that's clear. In the Haight-Ashbury, it was the 4,000 pieces of literature that the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council distributed. No. There were campaigns. The Haight-Ashbury D5 was, of course, the ground on which the Dean Preston campaign was fought. I don't know if Jenna's still with us, but she can talk about the field campaign that they ran. I believe that certainly Connie Chan in District 1 ran a full-throated field campaign and prevailed. I know that there was a broad community coalition around the revenue measures, from community and faith-based organizations to neighborhood organizations. There were literature drops. There were attempts to do slate cards to buildings in the Tenderloin, et cetera. So there was a very real grassroots campaign around the revenue measures and for certain progressive candidates for supervisor. And I think that's what shows. But, you know, the Haight-Ashbury, if I could tell you why the Haight-Ashbury, I've been doing this for longer than I care to admit. And it is an incredibly persistent, this phenomenon. The socioeconomic status of the Haight-Ashbury since I've been doing this has been totally transformed. It's gone from when I first moved into this district. This was a moderate to low income neighborhood that had, 30% of the population being African American. And it's now the second whitest neighborhood in the city. I would hazard to guess, I'll be delighted to see what the census tells us, the household income is in this neighborhood. But the voting patterns have remained the same. And the same is true in San Francisco. And I can't explain it in any meaningful way. I mean, I have asserted that there must be something in the buildings. The population changes, but the buildings remain the same, and the votes are in the buildings. I have no idea, but it is a remarkably consistent phenomenon in this neighborhood and in other neighborhoods in San. I mean, the Sunset has been voting moderate for as long as I've been doing this. The Pacific Heights and the Marina have been voting reactionary for as long as I've been doing this, no matter who comes and goes. It's really, I mean, the Sunset has totally transformed its ethnic base. It's gone from white ethnic to Chinese, yet the voting patterns remain the same. It's really quite remarkable. And I'd love to hear people's explanation of that. But what is undeniable is that voting patterns persist in San Francisco over time.
Calvin, there's a book, and I can't remember the name of it. It came out maybe 5 years ago or so, but it talked about how when people move, they move to places where they found people that had shared values. And so, this idea that the Haight was known for a certain type of value system, people like me, I grew up in the East Bay and chose the Haight, as a place that, obviously I'd be happy.
Yeah. Right. I have heard that theory as well. And I think that it bears water. I mean, if you can afford to buy a place in the Haight-Ashbury, you can afford to live anywhere in San Francisco. And so you choose to live in the Haight-Ashbury because of its values. That makes a certain amount of sense to me. But, the same is true when you go from Irish Catholic to Chinese Christian in the Sunset. I mean, it's an amazing phenomenon, and I'd love to devote some time and energy to hear people discuss what their opinions are about it.
If you have any more questions, feel free to just unmute yourself. to ask, and if you're on the phone, it's *6 to unmute. I guess I have one kind of on that point. You talked about like the increase in the Trump vote potentially having an impact on local politics and local voting, but with that kind of thought in mind of voting patterns staying pretty consistent, yeah, just wanted to know kind of more on your thoughts on that.
I'm sorry, was that a question?
Yeah, so what do you think that percent increase in Trump votes, it has an impact on, could or will have an impact on local elections?
Well, it's not nothing. It means something. And I'm not sure what it means, but when you look at, Philadelphia, Miami, New York City, Pittsburgh, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, every major city in the United States saw a rather stark increase in the vote between 2016 and 2020 for Trump. And generally that happened in communities of color. And I mean, we're at a difficult time now because exit polling is probably the least accurate in this election than it's ever been, because there was nobody at the polls. The overwhelming majority of the vote was cast by mail. And, the way in which exit polls work is you talk to people as they exit the polls. So exit polling is not too helpful, but it does appear to me to mean that there is significant dis-ease in urban areas with the National Democratic Party. And I think that Democrats, let me give you just one example. We are facing a historic destruction of urban transit systems across the country. Can you have San Francisco without Muni? Can you have New York without the subway? Can cities exist without a transit system? Yet you haven't heard one Democratic leader, not Nancy Pelosi, not Joe Biden, talk about transit and the alarm and collapse of the urban transit system. So what do we get? We get, front page story in the Chronicle today. We're going to have robot cars. Really? That's going to be the solution? We're going to have the private sector come up with electric cars, and that's going to replace electric cars, scooters, and bicycles are going to replace transit? Working class people, people of color in cities, people who cannot work at home, who work in jobs that they must get to, are dependent on transit. It's astounding to me that a party that claims to embrace not only working people, but people of color is absolutely silent on one of the most extraordinary transformations in urban history, in the collapse of transit systems that basically get working class people to and from their jobs. It's astounding to me, the silence of London Breed. What's Gavin Newsom's position? Has he even acknowledged the existence of the problem on transit? What we do have is we're told in today's Chronicle that Supervisor Weiner has introduced a new transit-oriented market rate housing development proposal in Sacramento. And Sacramento is going to go through this kabuki play again of pretending that we have transit-oriented development without a transit system. And have you heard Supervisor Weiner open his mouth about transit? David Chu open his mouth about transit? No, not the governor, not the mayor, not the Senate, not the Assembly. This is not on any of their monitors, on their scopes, and it's staggering to me. I mean, you cannot have San Francisco cannot exist without Muni. Our streets are too small, are too clogged. We need transit. New York City cannot exist without the subway. Yet we're looking at every major transit system in every major city on the verge of collapse and no help in sight. It's staggering to me, and I think it's not unrelated. Trump campaigned around the country saying, why should people of color continue to vote for Democrats? Democrats don't do anything for them. And I think maybe some people heard that this time. So I think in a very significant way, the next 2 years are going to be critical for the National Democratic Party. And restoring Barack Obama's administration is not going to get it done. It really isn't. I mean, what was Barack Obama's position on urban transit? What was his position on urban development, on affordable housing, on public housing, on employment? What was his position? What was the Democratic Party's position? Well, I think they're going to have to come up with some positions on those kinds of issues. And I just use transit as just a marker. Every transit system in every major American city is unionized. These are good union jobs to pay health care, health benefits, and retirement. And no Democrat is talking about preserving them. It's staggering to me. And I think it is an indication of what people, a certain number of people, perceive. I mean, the general pattern appears to be that what elected Biden in Pennsylvania was the vote in the suburbs, not in the cities. So when Barack Obama goes to Philadelphia, more people, 70,000 more votes are cast for Donald Trump after Barack Obama speaks in Philadelphia than in 2016. 70,000. 70,000 more Trump votes. And if you look at the numbers, the overwhelming majority come from Black communities. The overwhelming number of that 70,000 increase. I think the Democratic Party is in serious difficulties, and they're going to have to start acting in a way that they have not acted heretofore. You know, and what did they immediately do? They almost lost Congress. They didn't pick up much in the Senate. Congress turned around and reelected the same leadership. Without question, the same leadership. Same in the Senate. I don't think that dog is going to hunt for another 2 years. And believe me, Donald Trump may have lost this election, but if the Democrats don't pull up their socks and start doing things that benefit real people as opposed to contributors, I think they're in deep trouble. And we could look at a Donald Trump candidacy, a successful Donald Trump candidacy in 2024. I'm serious, folks. This is the only thing that saved our ass was Donald Trump's stupidity. I mean, this guy was his own worst enemy. And he was the one who unified the Democratic Party. Well, he's gone. What are the Democrats to do? And I think they have to develop an urban program. I think they have to develop a rural program. I think they have to talk about people, real working people that are hurting. Let's just think for 5 minutes about what it's going to be like to do the vaccinations. How successful are we going to have a vaccination program in blue California? What is Gavin Newsom's program? To rely on the county. What is San Francisco's program? Do any of us know what San Francisco's vaccination program is? Because that's what Gavin Newsom is relying on, is county health departments to do the vaccination. Now, there was a big announcement at the national level that Walgreens has a program. They're going to be doing a vaccination program. Does the San Francisco Health Department have one? You know, does the state of California have one? You know, it's going to be front loaded. Do we all remember what happened in the rollout of Obamacare? It blew up. You remember that? The website crashed. It was 2 months before anybody could enroll in Obamacare. There is a gap, you know, and this was the hip and kicky, too cool for school, Barack Obama, Mr. Tech, who couldn't put together a website to do his flagship policy. And it was an extraordinary embarrassment. It was political incompetence. So we have a governor who I have no idea what the rollout of the vaccination program is going to be. I will guarantee it will be reliant on counties, half of whom are in open rebellion to the policies, to the close down policies of this administration. I think it's going to be a great challenge that the Democrats are going to have to rise to, and I gotta say, I don't see it happening. I really don't, and I think the vote on Trump is a leading indicator of fundamental and basic dis-ease with the established policies and programs of the Democratic Party, certainly of the National Democratic Party, and I think of the state Democratic Party.
Yeah, we had someone in the chat say, former hate resident here in DC area, same situation here, proposed drastic cuts to transit. Local officials not focusing on issue here either.
So, you know, look at two things, folks. In the next 6 to 12 months. How the vaccination program unfolds and urban transit programs. If we are in the same place that we are now, or if we're in the same place that we are now, we won't be in the same place we are now on vaccinations. If vaccinations are as effed up as testing is, how many San Franciscans have been tested? Go to the health department's website and you'll see almost 1 million tests. Has everybody in San Francisco been tested? No. How many of those 1 million tests are of the same people? We know in today's paper that Senator Weiner has been tested 3 times. Do you know anybody that's been tested 3 times that isn't an elected official or a basketball player? The Warriors put before the city a program to open up their stadium for 6,000 people. And they guaranteed that they would do testing before each game and have the results back in 15 minutes. The city turned it down. But they have the capacity now. The capacity exists now to do instant testing. Do you know that you can't get a test in San Francisco unless you make an appointment? That there is only one testing site in San Francisco that's open on the weekends? That our official test result rate is only about 3% positive? Yet in the Mission, 2 times UCSF has been invited in to do spot testing in the Mission, and both times it was north of 10% positives. If we don't know how many discrete individuals have been tested in San Francisco, this has been 9 months, folks, and we haven't put together a testing program in San Francisco. Which means that we don't have any contact tracing. If you have to wait a week or 5 days for the return of a test, you can't do very effective contact tracing. And this has been known since April.
You want to raise your hand?
Yeah.
So if testing is an indicator, vaccines are going to be very interesting. 79 degrees below zero. They have to be kept at 79 degrees below zero, the Pfizer test. And it looks like we're going to be giving those tests in the middle of summertime in San Francisco, in California, probably during fire season. Think about that. Is the governor prepared for that? Has he told us how CAL FIRE is going to be doing vaccinations as well as fighting? I mean, what? I think this is a big test for Democrats in a blue state. I think it's a big test.
We got time for maybe one more question if anybody wants to ask. We also have an update from Jen Snyder in the chat. Vaccine should be here for healthcare professionals this month. By June, for everyone, or enough folks have it. There should be herd immunity. Free and available at Walgreens and pop-up sites, doctors' offices. Sure, it's going to be crazy. Very frustrating. At D5 office had to really push for testing pop-ups in the Fillmore.
I requested a question.
Yeah, please.
Well, it's hard to be positive, but does the discrepancy between the state Democratic Party and Democratic voters bode ill for the recall of the governor, which is about halfway to its over 1 million signature level, which I March. I've gotten tested twice, both in connection with health visits. And you're right, though, it is extremely difficult to get tested. But I'd like to know Calvin's thoughts on the chances of Newsom being recalled.
Not likely, Nick.
If he, I think it goes up every day. You know, the pushback in San Francisco against the state closing of playgrounds was, I think, very illustrative of where we are as a state. If the only government manner of dealing with this crisis, shut up and stay at home, that's not sustainable. It's got to be more than that. We have to have testing, contact tracing, and then we can open the economy. He has failed at that. I mean, dismally failed at that. I won't even get into unemployment. The fact that over 600,000 people haven't even gotten a check, and what, 9 DAs are saying there's this huge crime wave happening of prisoners defrauding the state for unemployment benefits, guys in prison, that we don't have a system that can do that. And we're 9 months into this. So I think if I was a betting man, I'd bet that another 3 months of this, especially if there's a major failure or hiccup in vaccination, I would say Gavin Newsom could well be recalled.
Any last questions? We got a couple minutes. Or any last thoughts?
Yeah, I have a question or a comment. This is Peter. I'm very concerned about the newspaper, the media landscape, as a place where maybe these kinds of discussions that Calvin is talking about could have happened or could be happening. And I'm very concerned that everything is sliding into the internet, and there is, I don't know where, this sort of thing is sort of publicly discussed in places that generally people recognize as a place where such discussions are happening and where news and information like that is happening. So the whole information world is a great concern. Any comments from Calvin?
Well, I think you're right, Peter. I don't think we've been well served by certainly the print media, not in San Francisco. Unfortunately, the only, the default position that we have is all on the internet. I think Mission Local, 48 Hills have limited resources, but I think they're trying. It's not what the Chronicle covers that is so distressing. It's what the Chronicle doesn't cover that is so distressing. They just simply don't cover important things. For example, the staggering thing to me is this whole thing about the unemployment situation. 200,000 unemployed San Franciscans. And there hasn't been a news story. There's been a columnist on the economics page of the Chronicle has done really good work on trying to sort out what's happening with unemployment. But in terms of the news stories, in terms of who is politically responsible, which is Gavin Newsom, The Chronicle has been absent, totally and completely. They'll run a story that's kind of a gotcha at the French Laundry, but they won't do the hard reporting on, it seems to me, urban transit issues, unemployment issues, the outrageous situation that happened in our state prisons. That was all Gavin Newsom. So yes, we're not well served by the print media, but not so much by what they're lying reporting. My problem is what they choose not to report.
Mm-hmm. Problem. And places like, things like the Bay Guardian are gone. And a lot of the local papers that we used to have are, have been dying off more and more. And those that stay are weaker and weaker and have fewer and fewer reporters and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And that's why we got to keep supporting, and HANC puts out our monthly newsletter too, which has been a definitely good source of information for me in the neighborhood. Well, thanks so much, Calvin, for that extremely informative report and discussion, and thank you everybody for all the questions. I definitely learned a lot. That wraps up our meeting. Thanks everybody so much for coming and being here. Thanks again, Kristen, for your report, and also Jen from Dean's office for giving us those updates. So hope everybody has a good holiday and stays warm and stays safe and healthy.
Thank you, David.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks, David. Thanks,
Thank you.
Kristen. Thanks, Calvin. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Happy holidays.
Everyone, have good holidays. Happy Hanukkah.
Be well.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yes, happy Hanukkah.
We will prevail.
Yeah.
Starting in with that.
we'll be able to hug and kiss soon, right?
Yeah. I had to say something so I could sleep well tonight. We will prevail.
Yeah.
From your lips to God's ear.
I hope so.
And,
If anybody's listening.
yeah.
I mean.
And then Groundhog Day.
All right, folks. Have a good night.
Dear.
Well, thanks, Dean's office, for showing up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
And
It
Preston.
means so much the turnout.
Night.
Our
Good
community
night,
here.
everybody.
Wow.
Bye.
We have community.
Yay.